Tero Isokauppila. Thank you for coming on, man. It's good to see you. It has been years since I've seen you. I hope I did not butcher your last name entirely.
No, that went well. It's great to reconnect. I feel like we met not a decade ago, but I want to say 8 years ago already at some of the entrepreneur events, and I haven't seen you since pre-COVID. Must be 2019 last time at some event. 2018, 2019.
Easily and frequently in passing. And COVID, I feel like was just a black hole, and it just like the time. Sometimes I feel like, oh, this thing happened 2 months ago, and actually it was 3 years ago, uh,
Hmm.
because that black hole just sucked reality away.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
So in that period of time, a lot has happened from you. And I originally, when we met, I don't know where you were exactly in the journey, but it was still pretty early in Four Sigmatic.
Hmm.
Can you give the timeline for Four Sigmatic and just some of the basic stats around that, whatever that means to you, revenue, employees,
Hmm.
growth curve, et cetera?
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I was born and raised in Finland and grew up on a farm. I'm a 13th generation family farmer, so me and my brother still manage the European farm. Luckily, it's only in the summer, so there's not that much work. So I can also gallivant around the world building businesses and whatnot. Lived in 10 countries. Four Sigmatic was launched already 10 years ago. It was originally supposed to be a lifestyle business. It was based in Hong Kong, no taxes, cool, get support, cash flow. And we raised, still today, we've raised very little money, which is kind of rare. And Four Sigmatic is a CPG company, as people call it, consumer packaged goods. We make kind of elevated coffees, proteins, supplements, and then pretty quickly on, the company started getting organic traction, and then it was pretty clear that the main market was the U.S. So we re-domiciled the business into the U.S. So it's an American company now, and the whole team is based in L.A. Really came here in 2015, launched in 2016, and had quite a bit of growth early on in podcast, direct to consumer. And then over the last few years, we've been transitioning to more maybe diversified marketing strategy and retail. So we're now sold at Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, places like that. And the team is still pretty small. We try to keep it around 40 or under. So we outsource many of the business functions. So innovation, marketing tend to be some of the things are the team is based out of. And we've been an 8-figure business for many years, and we don't have a valuation event, but it's probably a 9-figure valuation. So that's kind of it.
Awesome. So you started 10 years ago, so that was 2012.
Hmm.
And the first few years were Hong Kong based. When you said that it got organic traction, what did that look like? And what was your initial go to market? And we'll talk about kind of the transition to the US, but what was your initial go to market?
Initial go to market, what we thought it would be and what we ended up being are two different things. So we are known for mushrooms, particularly mushroom coffee. And when you tell people mushrooms, people get weirded out. It's a weird concept. And especially 10 years ago, I think now they're having a real moment, partly with psychedelics, partly with the work we've been doing, educating. I've written a few best-selling books about them. There's some other people that have really made it more mainstream. But we thought we would go wholesale first, and we were going to certain retail channels. But retail buyers, and you go to a large retail chain, and they're like, "What are these mushrooms?" And I think our product also was probably not ready for mainstream appeal. So it became direct to consumer very quickly because there was a small niche audience that was aware or wanted to be aware of fungi and mushrooms, and those people, we garnered them through online, through influencer marketing, and then later podcast marketing. um, so that's kind of where we started. So at very first it was retail, but pretty soon we pivoted into direct to consumer or some form of online sales.
Crazy. So initially it was retail. So you were working in the international market trying to get it into stores.
Yeah, and we did. We did get into stores, and and to the other question you asked, what does organic traction look like? It came in two ways. One was inbound. I think that's always a good sign for a young company. Is inbound opportunities, inbound sales. So I guess from an online marketing point of view, you're having some sort of virality or word of mouth marketing or referral based marketing. This is also, I think, true for services. I think it's a very healthy sign that you're doing is exciting, and or the people who you've served will talk about you to other people. So even before we were in the US, we had all kinds of celebrities reach out to us that had heard from a friend of a friend of a friend. We were mentioned in American media outlets, even though we're not sold in the US. Um, and then as we even when we got to the US kind of first, we only had a subsidiary here, we became like, or Urban Outfitters reached out and said like, hey, we want to
Hmm,
sell to you. Vogue reached out to us and wanted to make a story on us. Um, like a lot of weird stuff like that. We became eventually the first food product ever at Sephora, first food product ever at Ulta. These are things that are not normal for companies like us. So we
certainly.
had we had done something different, something unique, something, like that had we couldn't really capture the lightning in a bottle what that was. Now I think we know, but back then it was just like we had these like breadcrumbs that that seem that there's something here that consumers are excited about.
And how quickly was that initial growth? Like what was revenue like year one, two, three?
Yeah, it was like you know, we were we wanted to double every year, and some years we tripled, but like that was kind of our mental model. But you our first year was under $1 million, so
Hmm.
just we didn't have supply chain either, so we didn't have funding. So one limitation was working capital, which is pretty easy to solve if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's not easy to solve. um, but it was like every order, like I couldn't take a salary from the business for the first 2.5 years because every purchase order we made to purchase the products and packaging, then we got the revenue. We would make such a bigger order, it ate all our cash. So that was a limitation. But from sub million to over 1 million and doubling there, and we were well into many 8 figures before like the growth we couldn't sustain it. There's operational, I mean, there's a lot of reasons that stuff breaks depending what category, what sales channels you are. But there's a point somewhere in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million when stuff starts to break. Especially with physical products. I think with a digital funnels, because the delivery is different, you could probably sustain it into 100 million. But if with physical products, FDA regulation, this and that, the complexity, you can fly under the radar for a while on certain things, but with both hiring people, the scale of operations, the types of partners you need to work with to produce that much product and to deliver that much product, it just at some point it's so we had to like realize that doubling is not sustainable and we need to grow, still high clip, but like much more stable.
So let me back up for a second and talk about mushrooms because you mentioned you had found something, and I think I mean, even to date, obviously I know you and I've known the brand, but I don't think of anything else when I think about mushroom coffee or mushrooms as a consumable. Immediately, for Sigmatic is the brand.
Mhm.
Were there competitors when you launched it, and what did the landscape look like?
We had some competitors. They were, there was a multi-level marketing company that was touting that mushrooms can do anything for your life, file for your taxes, take out your trash, all the stuff. And then there was some smaller brands that, mostly in a capsule form, that was, not very appealing to mainstream consumers. So I think both from a delivery, coffee was very interesting because it would hide the bitter flavors of these mushrooms in a convenient format. But also, I think from a marketing point of view, there wasn't, you know, I guess there were some brands, but they were like pretty small and doing, I don't know how sophisticated overall. So that's kind of a.
So that was the landscape. Some people were out there attempting it, but not doing a very good job.
Mhm.
And I mean, had you consumed mushrooms as in coffee before, or was this a part of your upbringing? Like, why did you decide to say, hey, let's make mushroom coffee and sell people mushrooms? And by the way, just for clarity here, the types of mushrooms are what, and what are the purported benefits of them?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in Finland. Finnish people consume coffee, more coffee than anyone else in the world, almost three times more than Americans, which is hard to believe, but that's possible. And then in the
That's
Second World,
crazy.
yeah, in the Second World War, Finland was both attacked by the Germans and the Russians. So there was a lack of coffee beans. So people started brewing an ancient botanical for us called chaga. It's a mushroom that grows on a tree, a birch tree in our backyards, and it tastes very much like coffee. It was used by our ancestors for other purposes, and it was a coffee substitute. And after Second World War, University of Helsinki started studying its health benefits and found out that like a cup of chaga would equal to like 30 pounds of carrots and antioxidants. So that's where the idea came from. But it was also about opportunity. I was trying to sell these products in other formats, but the flavor was a real limitation for mainstream consumers, or just almost about anybody getting on, because the real mushrooms taste really gnarly and
Hmm.
and very earthy, very bitter, and most people don't like bitters. The two bitters that people like are coffee and chocolate. So those became kind of hot chocolate, and coffee became the two ways to get in. So it was like my heritage meets an opportunity meets a problem, which I think a lot of ideas are, is that they're not linear, but they're some sort of a combination of domain expertise, maybe a customer problem, an opportunity on the market where some of the best ideas come from.
Out of curiosity, the Helsinki study, were you aware of that before you launched it, or did that come to be as you tried to put the marketing angle together for the product?
Because I've used it for me. So I've coached professional athletes for almost 20 years in nutrition and optimal performance. So I was aware of these mushrooms and adaptogens for health purposes. And because one of these mushrooms, chaga, grew up in Finland, I had looked into its health benefits. I had a friend who was also doing high achiever nutrition coaching, and he was really into it. And he did a lot of research and found it. So yes, I was aware before we launched. I was not aware of it as a kid of the studies.
Okay, so initially you went retail. Why did you pick retail instead of direct to consumer in 12? I mean, in 12, we have entered the e-com era, right? And it's certainly not in full swing the way it is now, but it was present, right? There were ways to get online, sell direct to consumer. Why was that the approach?
This is not the right approach, but the approach mindset was that at that point, I believe 99% of food, and I think something like 80 something percent of supplements were sold in retail. So the market opportunity
Mm.
was bigger. Secondly, we were doing international, so we had a language barrier. So, like if you sell to Carrefour, which is, I think, after Walmart, the largest grocery store in the world, it's French. So there's like limitations with languages, there's limitations with labeling. So using distributors and retail was a way able to scale quickly and reach more people. So that was the logic. I think that's a great logic if you're working on a familiar category where you're just 5% better, but we try to work totally different than what anything you would find in retail shelf, making it pretty complicated.
Mm. Got it. And so, where were you in revenue when you moved to the US?
We were well over a million, but under 10.